Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where we are deep inside the phone call that Red West recorded of Elvis Presley, where we've learned that Red still has a wound festering from not getting to come to Elvis's wedding ceremony, although he was invited to the reception, he was in the hotel. It was a one-story affair, so they were all on the same floor. But Red is still very angry. It's been a decade of distrust. Hi, Gunn. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Hi, Tammy. Appreciate seeing you here. Let's hear about Red and how that brother got burned by the wedding machine.
Slipped out the back with a bullhorn hop over stucco walls where the flashbulbs stop. Joni's got colors, Joe's got the cash, Danny K's in the cockpit, burning jet fuel fast. Sinatra's bird, she's purring like a prayer. Christina's wings cut the desert air. Red's not on the list, he's pacing the floor, while the collar's got the press in a ballroom wall. Rona's got a sin and a Polaroid grin, but the ring's in a case with the diamonds grinning in. $15 for a license and a lie, while the best men shine with a bullseye tie. Blinded by the flight, wrapped up like a vow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the flight, when a heartbreak hits in the morning light. Oh, we were flying on a secret stream to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Palm Springs whispers, Bland's got the suit, but the real show's hidden in a velvet beat. Mama's flown in, daddy's eyes are wide, while the Memphis boys are split on the right. Livich opens up his velvet chest, bullhead complaints, diamonds in the west. But Red's got a wound that won't sit still, he's shouting down love from the windowsill. Color's got a script and a phantom plan, he's dealing out silence with a sleight of hand. You got too many, he says with a grin, let go of the love if you wanna win. Blinded by the flight, ran up like the bow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the flight, when the heartbreak hits you in the morning light. Oh, we were flying on a secret stream to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Christina's wheels kissed the tarmac clean, and the ring was slipped before the world had seen. But love, oh love, it don't run on time, it breaks in the silence, not the headline.
Thank you all for coming to Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're going to hear echoes again from Elvis Presley and from Red West in a phone call, a confrontation with each other in which Elvis continues to absorb blows from Red without returning any of his own. But he's identified the reason Red is angry, which is a wound from 10 years previously in 1967, when Red didn't get to come to the wedding ceremony. Now, there's been a lot of water under that bridge, but that one still hurts Red. However, Red's taking control of the conversation, and he's decided to turn it to what he wants to talk about. Let me key this up for us. have to pull this to the right spot.
I don't know. Just like pretty good time up in Vail. Oh yeah, we had a ball in Vail. That was that was one time out of the last few years that we really got back to the well, whatever, back to knowing how to enjoy ourselves. And I mean, everybody just had a ball. I know I did. Yeah, I know I did too, because that was something we'd all been wanting to do, just to get out away from it all, man. Yeah.
Red has been telling Elvis that Elvis doesn't enjoy life anymore and hasn't for several years. This is really a coded way for Red to tell Elvis that Red hasn't enjoyed life for several years, at least not with Elvis. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So, Red's saying it hasn't been any fun for several years. And he complains that he doesn't get to see Elvis anymore. And that the only time he does see Elvis is when Elvis is working. Now, I believe that there's a geographic disconnect between Elvis and Red, that Elvis lives in Memphis and Red lives in California. And therefore, when Elvis goes home, Red doesn't get to have that home time with Elvis anymore. Not the way that they used to. But that's not exactly Elvis's fault, but it appears Red didn't want to move to Memphis. You know, I'm not exactly sure where Red's at or why this distance between them exists. Other than that, that Red's referencing it's the last few years. He's also told us he sold his house, which appears to have been in California. But the only time they're seeing each other is when Elvis is paying Red to be there. And Red's performing some kind of function. And then Elvis interjects and gives the conversation a turn. And he says, we had a pretty good time up in Vail. And he's talking about Vail, Colorado. And they went up there and they did some skiing and some snowmobiling. And they did have a good time. I think Dean Nicopolis broke his leg on that trip. I think it was at least one of the, I think they might have gone to Vail twice. And Dean broke his leg on that one. But I'll have to look that back up. But Red says, oh yeah, we had a ball in Vail. Man, that was one time in the last few years that we got back to the well, whatever, to knowing how to enjoy ourselves. I mean, everybody just had a ball. So Red returns to this theme of having fun, that it's not fun to work for Elvis anymore. And apparently that was one of the things that Red enjoyed about working for Elvis, was that it was fun. And for the last few years, I guess it's been a lot more like work. Red seems to be saying something close to that. And when they spend time together as friends, like they did in Vail, well, then they do enjoy themselves. They can slip back into that friend mode. But something about the work is preventing that now. I believe that in the old days, Red wouldn't have divided work from this other time, that they used to have fun everywhere. That the whole point was they were taking the fun to work and they were doing work during the fun. That was kind of all of it. That was part of the taking care of business. The fun was part of the business, but Red's only in the business part now. And he's blaming that on Elvis. Elvis says, I know I did. Or I know we did. That they all had fun up there in Vail, Colorado. Well, Elvis says, I know I did. So Elvis is saying, yes, Red, I had fun there with you, that we had fun together. And Red says, I know that I did too. So again, the two men have connected right here in the middle of the phone call. The friendship has been remembered. Again, another spark has been found. They could have turned everything around right here. Red could have turned everything around. It really has to be Red. He's the one that's recording the phone call. He's the one that's in this phone call with it non-pure intention. And really, no matter what Elvis's intentions are, they can't be as bad as Red's, because Red has intentionally trapped Elvis into the phone call, has baited the trap with the phone number, because Elvis wouldn't know this phone number. This is 1976. Red doesn't have a cell phone. Red had to somehow transmit the phone number of where he's at in this hotel, of the phone that's next to him. That had to make it to Elvis somehow. It appears it might have gone through Charlie Hodge, because they referenced that Charlie Hodge told Elvis that Red still had this wound about the wedding. That's how Elvis knows it's still bothering him. Let's listen to more of what they have to say.
No, it's okay. It's okay because they just want me to have a house up there. Yeah. And want to buy footing and things. So these real estate guys get a hold of that. So I mean, beautiful place. But my thinking is not wrong with his life right now. Right. I don't blame you.
Now, this is something that's really important that Elvis just said. Because Red had said that he had had a good time too. That was their reconnection. And then Red tries to explain it, and he says, because that was something that we all had been wanting to do, just get away from it all. Red's kind of describing, if you're following my spiritual series, a sheepfold. He wanted to get into some kind of safety where they could all take their masks off together, some kind of area where they might be shepherded. They would be able to take these masks off. They'd be able to communicate with each other. That appears to have happened a little bit there. But then Elvis says something that's just tragic. He says that's okay because, they just want me to have a house up there. And what he's telling Red is that while you were having a good time, and you were having an almost Edenic experience again, suddenly we're back in the Garden of Eden, and we're all friends, and nobody's eating the animals, and everything is perfect, that you didn't notice, even though you are my protector, that these men that brought us there were after me to purchase a house, that they wanted money from me, that it seemed like this was a good deal and a favor. But even in the sheepfold, I was under attack by the wolves, and you weren't paying any attention, Red. That is what Elvis is saying right here. He could not even go to Vail, Colorado, without people having an agenda trying to sell him the house he was in, that he just wanted to borrow. And it's not like he wasn't willing to pay more than market value to borrow. But they were still after him. He says one near the city and things. These real estate guys get a hold of that. So Elvis may have even said, wow, this is a great place. I really like it. Somehow, someone near him went and told somebody that has a real estate connection. And then the real estate people are there. That's the ones who are trying to sell him on something. There's money that has gotten to Elvis while he's trying to relax up in Vail, Colorado. Hi, City of Angels girl. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And then Elvis says, I mean, beautiful places, but my thinking isn't along these lines. Not now. So there appears to have been a time when Elvis was thinking, I'm going to build something beautiful. I'm going to live someplace that's amazing. I think we might have seen that in 1967 when he tried to build a mansion on the Circle G. Kind of fell apart. Then he seemed to be okay back at Graceland. Now his wife is gone. And I'm not saying in any way that he held unresolved love for Priscilla like the tabloids did, but he had wanted to be married. Even if it was ultimately to the wrong person, he had wanted to have a family, a wife and a family, and now he did not. She had his daughter with him across the country. His mind is no longer on this perfect house thing. It's not about what he can see when he looks out the window. It's about who's inside the house. And that's why he is never going to leave Graceland. And he owns houses in other places, but he owns houses there because he has business there. He has to do work there. In Los Angeles, he has to film the movies. In Palm Springs, that's where he could slightly get away from Los Angeles. It's all connected to the business. But he doesn't really have a vacation home. He just has his heart home, and that's Graceland. And it sounds like from Not Now, his attention has moved to other things. And then Red says, I don't blame you.
You can always go up there and rent some. What? But, I don't know what, I don't want to get real serious. It's been so long since I talked to you. I'm going to get real serious on the conversation. But
So this is kind of funny. Hi, Chillin. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. Red says, I don't blame you. You always go up there and rent something. And he kind of trails off, and like, maybe it's just now hitting him that Elvis is saying, Red, these people were all over me while we were up there to spend this money and try to steal something from me, get my name onto another piece of paper. And you are out there having a blast, doing whatever you're doing. And now suddenly Red's kind of waking up to that fact here in the middle of the conversation. And he's saying, yeah, but you always rent, Elvis. That's exactly what I'm saying, Red. I always rent. And I pay more than fair market value. Everybody gets a good deal. And yet I'm getting the timeshare pitch is the way that most of us would, I think, see it. If you've ever been to a timeshare, when they invite you to stay for a weekend, and all you have to do is listen to their commercial for a couple of hours. And that's the longest, worst couple of hours of your life. Unless you are really good at strong arm salesman, it's a really rough couple of hours. And it's definitely not worth the weekend that you get to spend at the resort, no matter how nice it is. And that's Elvis's experience. They're constantly trying to sell him on something while he's there. And that's why he had a good time, but it wasn't really a great time. And Red seems to kind of figure that out as he's talking. And then he says, but I don't know what. I don't want to get real serious. Red has tricked Elvis into calling. He's recording the phone conversation. He's wanting to use something that he gets in the conversation to help sell a book that he's writing to say bad things about Elvis. But he says, I don't want to get real serious. I'm not sure Red knows what the word serious means. Red says, it's been so long since I talked to you. So Red again acknowledges that there's been this rift. And suddenly they were almost laughing like friends again. And I think it's kind of hurting Red a little bit. And he says, it's been so long since I talked to you. I don't want to get into this real serious of a conversation. Red is spiraling out of control a little bit here. He was very focused for a second about getting Elvis refocused on Red's problems. But in just a few sentences, Elvis has turned the whole thing around. He's thrown out a strike, if this was karate, but it wasn't at Red. It was just kind of near Red, and it's drawn Red's attention. Hi, TT's ASMR. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And City of Angels is asking, is he trapping Elvis? Of course he is. He's wanting to use this recording to make money off of Elvis. And City of Angels girl says Elvis should have never talked to him, but I think Elvis may have had a lawyer to tell Elvis not to say too much to him. I don't think any lawyer would have ever said, Elvis, you should make this phone call. This is Elvis, I think, 100%. And he's trying to give Red one more chance. One more chance. And they've almost got it. They're almost there. Almost there. But let's stop for a moment and flip over, because I have something else I want to show you. And this is just a summary of the timeline that got us here, because I have a couple of things to bring out about it. And in 1975, that's where we know that Red and Elvis have agreed the silence started. But Red's Dave Hebler actually made a couple of references to the fact that it went back further. Now, for Dave, it may have gone back further because Elvis said 2 years. That would go back to 1974. But from Red, it's at least been silent since 75. We don't really know about Sonny. And then in July 1976, they're terminated. In the fall, they find Rupert Murdoch through Steve Dunleavy, although Dave Hebler has said they talked to a lot of different publishers. Now, if you talk to a lot of different publishers, and then you choose a publisher, like, I think there's a few different things that could have happened. One is you talk to some publishers and they said, oh, don't want to have anything to do with this. And they quietly dropped out. I don't know if any did. Or they may have talked to publishers and they said, hey, here's what we'll pay you. Here's the way the deal will be structured. And out of those, Rupert Murdoch and Steve Dunleavy said 50 grand plus 1.6 cents per copy. Now, the 50 grand split by 3 was about 16,000, almost 17,000 a piece. And in those days, that had been about, for each of them, that was around a year's salary. Pretty close. So that's why this offer was tempting for them. At the same time, Red's doing things like selling his house. Apparently because he can't afford it anymore, selling his cars. And yet, they've got this deal hammered out by September. And Red's telling this to Elvis in October. Again, Red's timeline for how he sold the house doesn't really make a lot of sense. So in October, that's when they're all at the hotel. That's when we're having this phone call. And Gunn says talk serious to Red could mean talk about Red's mistakes. That could be. That could definitely be. I don't want to talk about anything I've done wrong, Elvis. Let's keep this conversation to what you've done wrong, because that's what's going to sell these books. Now, in August of 1977, this book's released on August 1st, and Elvis passes away on August 16th. And by the end of the day, they are printing 250,000 more copies of this book. Now, that's not the last that they printed of this book. That was just the first that they printed of it after Elvis passed away in order to cash in on those sales. And so this was projected to shatter Elvis's image because the firings catalyzed the first major commercial account from inside Graceland, challenged and the carefully curated public image of the king, exposing the torrid side of his private life. A lot of bad things have been printed about Elvis, but this was the first time they got 3 guys that they can name. This isn't an unnamed source inside Graceland. This is 3 named people with faces, and they could put them on the television and have photographs. And Pat says that this is so heartbreaking. And that it is. This is what these guys did. Now, we could see that they too were hurt, but these actions that they took, I don't believe they're justified in any way. And yet it seems Elvis was still trying to forgive them. And City of Angels girl says, what if Red had police on the wiretapping to catch Elvis to get him in trouble, maybe? That's even possible. I mean, I don't think so because we got Steve Dunleavy involved. And I just don't see Steve Dunleavy as upholding great moral values to bring the police in, but maybe. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Tammy saying there were no police involved. And financial and personal rifts, the project was driven by a mix of financial necessity, lost wages, and emotional fallout. It highlighted how deeply the personal relationships within the Memphis Mafia had deteriorated. At least these 3. But we also know it's not good with Joe Esposito and Dr. Nicopolis right now. They have made some major mistakes, but Elvis seems to have forgiven them on this phone call. He's saying they're good people, and he's trying to get past it. And this publication timing coinciding almost exactly with Elvis's death, coinciding so closely that Sonny did an interview that morning before anyone knew Elvis had passed away, saying that Elvis was hopped up every day on drugs. But this amplified the book's cultural impact because it was newly printed. There was a bunch of copies out there and people were able to quickly get a hold of it. And it permanently shaped the public memory of the final years and Elvis's struggle with addiction or drugs that he needed or drugs that he may have abused. Nobody really knows. What we know is that the 3 who wrote the book, well, they had their own issues with it. And they were certainly projecting some of their issues onto Elvis. So nothing is clear. But we do have one clear thing, and that's a very nice picture of this particular check, which was written to Sonny West on May 9th, 1975. Signed E.A. Presley for $1,500. It says bonus for April 1975 tour. So this is not money that Sonny earned in the sense that it was paid to him weekly. This isn't the money that Sonny and Dave and Red say is the money they could barely live on. Or that was they couldn't count on after they got terminated that they were paying their bills with. This is bonus money. Something above and beyond what they would normally get paid. Now, Dave is saying that he gets paid $350 a week. So $350 a week, I would imagine Sonny gets a little more and that Red gets even more than that. But we can just assume they all make $350 a week, bare minimum. Now that's gross, but this $1,500 is gross as well. Let me just see. 1,500 divided by 350. Oops. Try this again. This is over 4 weeks of pay. That's like an extra month of pay. So, Sonny, you did a good job. Here's an extra month of pay. Now, in a future episode, probably tomorrow, we're going to do a financial analysis that allows us to see how much this really is, like in today's money, how much it felt like in society then. It's a little deeper than I normally go, but we could look at this check and say that in 1975, if you got this $1,500 check, it would have felt like almost $9,000 in today's money. And that's significant. That's pretty good. However, if you're Sonny West, you've been working for Elvis since before 1965. You've been working for him for 10 years, for more than 10 years. In 1965, if Elvis had given you the same check, $1,500, it would have felt like over $15,000 in today's money. So that is the amount of inflation that a guy like Sonny West is under. Well, Elvis and everybody else. But this is just a great example that Sonny, 10 years previously, would have looked at that $1,500 and gone, that's like $15,000. But now he looks at it and goes, it's a little less than 10. So that just helps you feel what it would have felt like to Sonny. But to Sonny, it may have still seemed like more than 15,000, because I don't think a lot of us, like, we still remember prices of the past in the way that the inflation was before. I think it's just kind of a human thing. And Tammy says, did these people not find a job for themselves? Were they that incompetent? Well, Red had one lined up. It was going to start right after he got done with this interview. Soon as he could get out of this hotel at the end of the month, he was going to be on Black Sheep Squadron with Robert Conrad. He's going to be on TV. And Gunn says they really got spoiled. And Chillen says that after leaving Elvis Presley's employment in 1976 and following his death in 77, Red established a successful career as a character actor, stuntman, and songwriter. He was already getting royalties from songs. Elvis had already set him up with that with the Christmas song. And Tammy says that imagine if they had a day job, they got fired, would they cry and write a horrid book about it? Well, absolutely they would, because that's what they did. And Tammy says that Red still cried about it and did for a very long time. And Gunn repeats that they're spoiled. Red did. Red was angry a long time. We've seen some of the clips. Now, do you think that this was the only bonus check that Sonny got? This is apparently for a single tour, which is like 4 weeks. Now, what happens after they come home from tour? Because one of the things we're going to see when we look at tomorrow is that I'm doing this in the most generous way possible. Because that's the way Elvis treated these people, in the most generous way possible. So we're going to interpret the data in the most generous way possible. And I'm going to point out all the generosity. But one of the ways is there's a myth that they were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, that's kind of true. If Elvis called, you would be expected to show up. It's a kingdom. If the king calls, you are expected to attend. But did you have to be waiting around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? No. You came home from tour, and when Elvis took a vacation, you took a vacation. Elvis only had the valets and stuff still working. Sonny's a bodyguard, a different deal. Or he was doing advanced security. So he would have some time off right then as well. That's why Red didn't have to come back to Memphis. They weren't working during those periods. They're still getting paid. I don't think they were not getting paid during those periods. I can't be sure. So maybe that's what the bonus is. It makes up for that. But the way these guys act is there is no other paycheck. So they must be getting that pay every week. And they never say every week except when I'm not around. So I just thought you guys might like to see this particular check. And Chillin's saying that Sonny West worked in various roles, including running an Arabian horse breeding company with his wife, designing Western jewelry, and serving as a tour security chief. He later became a radio show host. I wonder where Sonny got all that knowledge about horses. You think it was Mike McGregor on the Circle G? I mean, I'm sure Sonny got some knowledge elsewhere, but do you think it all started out there on the Circle G when Elvis gave Sonny a horse? And Gunn says that if Elvis hadn't been so kind, I don't think they would have dared to write this book. Well, that's an interesting thought. That maybe they felt he still loved him so much he wasn't really going to strike back. And they called that one right because he didn't really strike back. So here's what happened with the publication. August 1st, it gets published. 400,000 copies. Same day Elvis passes away, Sonny West does an interview in the morning. He says Elvis was on pills all day long. And because Elvis passed away that day, this quote goes around the world. Nobody would have ever heard it. It would have been like in a couple of newspapers. Probably just the Chicago newspaper that Sonny actually did the interview for. Maybe some of the more tabloidy papers. But because Elvis passed away, it went to every paper. Everybody that had the Associated Press put it into their paper. And then within 6 hours, so Memphis time, that would have been 9 p.m., the presses were spinning, pushing off 250,000 more copies of this book. And this is some of what we're going to look at tomorrow. But let's take a look at some more of this phone call.
I've always been worried about you about, taking quite a few things. I thought that would, worry about so much. You trying to hurt me. But see, I know what they do. Well, that's after you hurt me. You already hurt me. You hurt me and my family very bad. Left us out in the cold. So let's don't talk about me trying to hurt you. Yeah. Well, all I know is I was out in the cold and couldn't understand. All I know.
So Red and Elvis, they start to go at it a little bit here. The friendship was almost sparked, but then that emotion quickly catches flame, but not as friendship. They start going in at each other a little bit. And Elvis kind of throws out his first shot, first real barb. Red's been saying, I don't want to get real serious. And then he says, we were all worried about you, meaning they were worried about Elvis. I have always been worried about, but you know, taking quite a few things, I thought. So Red seems to be stumbling over some words here where he's trying to accuse Elvis, I think, of taking drugs. But for some reason, he doesn't want to come right out and say it onto the tape. And I don't know what that's about, because that's what they're going to put into the book, right? But he dances around it a little bit. And Elvis, that doesn't sit right with him. And he says, you worry about me so much, and then you turn around and try to hurt me. But see, I know what that is. So he's basically telling Red that Red's not worried about him. That Elvis sees through this facade of worry, that it doesn't have anything to do with him, that it's like these people in Vale who are trying to sell him the house. Red, I just telegraphed to you, I see through this kind of crap, because that's what ruined the vacation in Vale. And he bluntly tells Red, you turn around and try to hurt me. Which is what Red's doing right now. Red's recording the phone call and to try to hurt Elvis. And Elvis says, but see, I know what that is. Saying, I see through that. Now, is Elvis also saying, you're recording me right now, Red? I know that you are. Because Red's again stumbled over these words about the drug. Pat says that she can understand why Elvis felt alone. And Tammy says, can you imagine if Elvis hadn't been kind to them and the kind of things they would have said? Yeah, exactly. Unless they'd been too scared, but probably they would have said terrible, terrible things. Tammy says, who needs friends like this when you have enemies like this? And so Elvis, he's thrown out this shot. You hurt me. Red's been telling Elvis over and over that Elvis hurt him. And Elvis has tried to apologize for it. And now Elvis is turning the tables a little bit. It's not just you, Red. You hurt me. And Red says, well, that is after you hurt me. Red says it's okay because you did it to me first. This is a very childish thing to say. That it's okay for me to hurt you because you hurt me. That as friends, that's what we do. You hurt your friend, and your friend, he comes back and he smacks you too, because that's what friends do, right? That's what Red says. Well, that is after you hurt me. You not only hurt me, but you hurt me and my family very bad. Left us out in the cold. This is a reference back to this house thing that Red sold. That Elvis didn't even know he sold the house. And it's a reference to not talking to Red and not taking his phone calls. Not paying him anymore. Not supporting his lifestyle. You've left us out in the cold. And Red says it's not just him, it's my family you hurt through that. And Red's angry about it. So most likely, Red truly does feel that Elvis hurt him and his family. You know, you can't really ever tell somebody that their emotions aren't valid because there's no shutting them off most of the time. Red is hurt right here, and that's what Elvis has got to address if he wants to get out of this. But Elvis is angry now. Now they've both slapped at each other. and things have to escalate. Red says, so don't let's talk about my trying to hurt you. Red doesn't want anything on this phone call about Elvis, about Red hurting Elvis. That's not the purpose of this phone call. This is a recording, and Elvis can't look like a good guy on it. So that can't happen. At the same time, Red's saying that he doesn't want to try to compare who hurt who. Well, probably not, because he's probably not going to come out well in that deal. And he's still trying to push his pain to the front. Not your pain, Elvis. You've called me to talk about my pain. That's all I want to talk about.
The fires were so bad. People were scared to move and everything. Yeah, well, that's true too. So who knows?
And suddenly the temperature drops again. So there was a short clash, and then things drop. Elvis says, well, things went on that you didn't know about. And Elvis has already told Red about things he didn't know about. $1.3 million I'm losing, Red, because Joe and Dr. Nick drugged me into this thing that you weren't watching out for. And if I hadn't been careful up in Vale, they'd have got me on this house thing. There's other stuff than that, Red. You didn't have your eye on the ball. You weren't paying any attention. You weren't talking to me, so you don't know what was going on. All that's being said here. And Red, he kind of takes it because it has been talked about on the call already. He says, yeah, well, all I know is that I was out in the cold and couldn't understand. And Red's again circling back to his pain. This is about my pain, Elvis. This call is about me and what you did to me. Now, what did Elvis do? I guess he stopped paying. It's not what he did, it's what he didn't do. He didn't pay him anymore. You know, Elvis was always concerned if his friends were his friends because they got paid. Do I have to pay these people in order to be my friends? And here's the one that he paid the longest and thought was his closest friend. And he's telling him basically, yeah, you did have to pay us. And then once you stopped, the moment you stopped, because that was an attack on my family. So it gets rationalized from just something against me to something against my whole family, which makes it much more emotionally charged. And Elvis says, all I know is that there was friction that was created in the group. That's Elvis saying, Red, you weren't getting along with anybody. You and Sonny and Dave, you started causing these issues. That's why we weren't having fun. That's why we weren't communicating. You seemed to lose it there for a minute up in Vale, but at the same time, you didn't protect me. So how long could this thing go on? That Elvis can't have friction in the group around him. That's the whole point of the group, is to have no friction. Elvis says the vibes were so bad. People were scared to move and everything, you know? Now, I'm not really sure what move means or everything. But it sounds from the word scared, and that it's Elvis saying it, that people were scared of Red, Sonny, and Dave. Now, we've heard Dave say that the day after he got fired, went over to a private residence that Elvis was at, walked in with a gun on his hip, basically kept people hostage in a living room. I don't think he ever told them they couldn't leave, but they felt possibly scared to leave. And Elvis is indicating that that kind of fear was not an uncommon thing around these three. And Red says, yeah, that is true too. So Red, he acknowledges that this is true, that people were scared of them. But that was part of their mystique. So Elvis did help cultivate that with them. But they allowed it to affect the inner group. It wasn't something to be used on your friends and your people around you. It was to be used to protect Elvis from the external world. Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here.
What the hell? So, yeah, being told. I just know this got to be very, very tense situation, whereas he could have been fun and relaxed kind of thing. Yeah.
There's a TV or something now in the background. And is that TV in the same room? Do these people not know Red's trying to record a call? I think, aren't they all in on it? But what Elvis says is something very significant here. And it's a very generous statement. Elvis says, so who knows what they are hearing or being told? Elvis knows there's gossip that moves around his group. He knows that not everyone's in the know. He knows that when people are not in the know, there's a vacuum of information and people will fill it in. And that those rumors then begin to move around and they take on their own life. They become real on their own. So he recognizes that he doesn't know what people are hearing or being told. And therefore, he's generous in his interpretation when he hears or witnesses their action, or they tell him what they're thinking. He says, I just know that it just became a very, very tense situation. Whereas it could have been a fun and relaxed kind of thing. Something went wrong. He's talking about Red and Dave and Sonny. That when they were around, something was tense. It should have been fun. This thing that happened at Vale where Red's having fun, that's the way it should have been all the time. And that it wasn't that way for anybody, but that it was Red's fault and Dave's and Sonny's. And yet Elvis still isn't blaming them. He's just pointing out it was you. It's part of the way that you're looking at things. And you then project that onto the rest of us, and it really does become no fun for anyone. And I had to make changes so that we could get back to this fun and relaxed kind of thing. That's what a boss does. That it was supposed to be this way and something went wrong. Again, Elvis is saying, I'm not blaming you, Red. I recognize there are forces outside of our control. And I recognize that sometimes we listen to the wrong people and we make mistakes. And I'm still willing to forgive you, Red. Something went wrong. But in that, on top of the racquetball thing, Red, you let me get into this racquetball. Now I got Dr. Nick, I got Joe, I got to deal with all this other thing. And you're over here with Sonny and Dave just crying and screaming and kicking your feet, and we need to end this thing. And Elvis says, and everything else, all the personal business. It was a fact. We did have to cut down. And that could be implying on expenses, as it says here, but it could be just on the number of people that were in the area at any one time. There's too many people at Graceland all the time. There's too many people in the business. It's just too big. We gotta scale down. Nowadays, a corporation would call that right sizing. Not a very popular term. It's never popular. And Red would say, well, I was there first. I should have been the last to go. But Elvis has said, I had the feeling. What's the feeling? He had the feeling Red didn't want to be there, wanted to go. And Dave's already said, I wouldn't take my job back, even while he was there with a gun in a private residence waiting for Elvis to confront him. He said, I wouldn't take my job back. So it's not hard to figure out what this feeling was that Elvis had. But that's where we've got to leave it for today, because we've reached the end of another phone call or another hour. And so I'm going to leave everybody with a song like I always do, but let me catch up on the chat. And Gunn says it's a wonder that Elvis doesn't get mad when hearing Red's talking. Doesn't even talk loud, except for that one little clash that they had. And he is very, very calm. And Gunn's saying it's making her angry just to listen to Red. Yeah, that's true. Because you can just hear how he keeps trying to turn it back to himself. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So I'm going to leave everybody with a song today, and I want to thank you for spending your time here with me. I do enjoy getting to tell you all these pieces of Elvis history. And here's another one. This is He Gave Away His Heart. You all keep on taking care of business. Hey, Jeff, thank you for coming.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian suit, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfolds. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight. Then back behind the velvet door, he gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shapes from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I get